All right, hi everybody. I'm just going to quickly remind you that this is the liturgics class, basically. It's a class for training readers. Now, because there's a propensity for people to come late for their first time, we'll hold off a couple minutes, make sure that you're all connected to audio, and go over some basic things before we get started. First of all, thanks for being here. There's a lot of other things you can do at this time on a Monday night, and I appreciate it. If this isn't something you want to get involved with, I understand. You're not going to hurt my feelings. It's just important that you realize what we're going to be doing here, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. We have a few people whose audio is still connecting. All right, one more person. All righty. Let's see if we can stop the video there. All right. This is a 10-week-long readers class. And the purpose of this class is basically to not simply chunk out somebody who can put together a reader's Vesper service, although you'll easily be able to do that in just a couple of weeks. But to give a broad grounding so that you can be basically what we call an able-bodied reader, a reader who can fill in at any of the services and work very competently through the liturgical books. Now, this may be a little bit more involved than what you're sort of gaming for. I understand all that. You want to basically look at it this way. After a couple of weeks, you'll be able to put together great Vespers. After a couple more of those, you'll be an expert at doing Vespers. And if you continue, you'll be an able-bodied reader. The value for this is not a little thing. I taught all my sons to read by teaching them to read in church. And you can ask any of them. Joseph's here. Just a reminder, there's a group chat in the side. Oh, well, there's Joe right there. There's a group chat in the side, and we will have some questions and answers at the end. But right now, I just want to go over basically what we're going to do and what the basic objectives are. This is a free thing, but it's a serious course. There's not going to be hardly any homework, but there is going to be some videos that I want you to read. And again, I want you to take notes as we go forward because it's going to be important. So I just to mention very briefly, I was a reader for 6 years in the Russian Orthodox Church. I went to seminary after that, but 6 years of solid practice reading, not only on Sundays, but also during the week and weekday services and stuff. It's good for you. It's very formative for you. It gets you quickly in the rhythm of the church. That's what creates the formation for it. And it's something that you're able to teach others to do. I always want to have a deep bench of good readers wherever I am. Any parish that I have, I want to have at least 3 good readers so that I don't have to worry about services being put together. I don't have to worry about things that have to be done. Readers are kind of the able-bodied seamen of the church. They run around, they take care of everything. They're there to give responses. They're there to do readings. They're there to put services together. And I know that sounds like an awful lot. So let's start with a couple basics here right up front. First of all, we're going to listen to a video. We're going to watch a video, actually, and you won't have to listen to me chatter all the time, about liturgical books, all right? You have to know where to find things, and Orthodox services can be very complex. I don't want you to worry about that. About the time our eyes are starting to glaze over and say, whoa, 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 this is way too much information, I want you to realize it is too much information. Everything you will learn is step by step, okay? You don't have to memorize everything. You don't have to know everything right out of the gate. So I'm going to show you some of the things that I want to ease you into what we're going to be doing, okay? Because we have 10 weeks to cover one basic service that has basically 4 variable parts. And while it sounds simple, it's a little more complicated than that, but it's not much more complicated than that. That is, there's the basic Vesper service. It has 4 sections which are variable, and depending on the feast, the saint, or the time of year, that will tell you where to look for those variable parts, okay? Let me show you to start with. This is what's called the Orlogion, okay? It's the book of the hours, basically. You see that? This is the St. Tikhon's version of it. It's no longer in print, of course, but it is excellent, of course. That's why it's out of print. I don't know why they don't reprint good things like this. There are other Orlogions that are available. The one by Holy Transfiguration Monastery, this one, it's a big red book. Holy Trinity Monastery in Jordanville has a Russian Orthodox version of this one. This one's more appointed for Byzantine chanting and text. So the translations are a little odd to our English. But the Book of the Hours basically does this. It's the services for the hourly services. First, well, it starts with Vespers. Vespers is the first service in the Orlogion because it's the sunset prayers, right? The 6 p.m. prayers, with the liturgical day begins. Then there's Compline. Then there's Nocturne at midnight. Then there's Matins officially. Then first hour, third hour, sixth hour, ninth hour, which leaves you at 3 p.m. and Vespers starts again. All of those are in the Orlogion. So you're probably thinking, well, I guess I better get one. No, you don't have to get one. All right, most of the things that you'll be doing will be out of Vespers or Matins. Liturgy is kind of its own thing. It's pretty much standard. It has some variables, but for the most part, it remains the same. And Vespers is what you're going to be focusing on, Vespers and occasional services, which stick out of the normal schedule. So the Orlogion is the Book of Hours. That's where you find the different Vesper services, the text for them, and for all the hours as well. Third and sixth hour is what we commonly do on Sunday morning before Divine Liturgy. The next book you need to become familiar with is called the Festal Menaion. Okay? Sometimes it's referred to as just the Menaion, but there are two Menaions. The one for great feasts, the Festal Menaion, and then the one which is just called the Menaion, which is, Menaion means month book, the book of the month. This is October, so we would go to the October Menaion to see the saint of today, and all the services would be, all the variable parts of the services for the celebration of the feast of that saint would be in the Menaion. Likewise, all the variable parts of the services for any of the 12 great feasts will be in the Festal Menaion. So if you have this book, you have everything you need for the 12 great feasts. Important book. Likewise, during Lent, when we're not doing the normal thing, you pick up the Lenten Triodion. You'll learn what the word Triodion means later. It means 3 odes, and you'll find out what that means. But basically, this is the book that's starting with the pre-Lenten weeks and going all the way through Holy Week. All the variable parts of all the Lenten services are all in here. Okay, so we're talking about the Orlogion, the Festal Menaion, and there's the General Menaion, the General Month Book, and then the Lenten Triodion. These are the big ones that you're going to want to get hold of. You don't have to get hold of them right away. You can get a lot of these things online, and I will provide for you links that I want you to have access to so that you can get some of these things. Now, one of the most helpful things for any reader and any clergyman is what's called a rubrics book. That is, someone somewhere has already figured out all of the variable stuff for all the feasts of the year and put it in a book. This is the one for 2019, see? It's a St. Innocent liturgical calendar. It's not a calendar so much as it is a rubrics book. And I know you can't see this, but if we were to, for example, go to October, and today is October 5th. So let's have a look at this. Calendar October 5th is liturgical September 22nd, the Apostle Quadratus of the 70. His services are transferred from September 21st, the prophet Jonah from the 8th century BC, and it basically gives a list of all the saints of the day for the weekday and the epistle and gospel for that day, the correct ones. Your church calendar, the one you have on your wall, is pretty good. It's made by the same people, But if there's a discrepancy between this book and the wall calendar, this book will be correct. The wall calendar may be off. It's not super authoritative. It's just a recording of what this is. And so those where the typos might be. But the liturgical calendar from St. Innocents is where the value of this is going to be for you. Because on the Sunday, for example, it'll give you a great deal of the information about Vespers. I know you can't see this, but it tells you what's appointed for Vespers specifically, and for Matins, and then Divine Liturgy. So if you have to check and see, on October 5th from last year, the Sunday for Divine Liturgy would have Blessed is the Man, which is the Kathisma reading. The Lord I have called verses in tone 7. There are 10 of them, 6 from the Actoikos and 4 for John the Baptist. Then it talks about the appropriate prokimenon, again from the Actoikos, the Apostica, and the Troparia for the Virgin. That is, the book tells you all the variable parts and where to find them, just in case you're not sure, based on the feast or the month or whatever. If you're not sure, this book tells you exactly where you find all of those books. Now, the other book that you're going to want to know about is called the Actoikos. The word Actoikos means the 8 tones. As most of you know, and don't let your eyes glaze over yet, okay? We're just talking about 4 books so far. The Actoikos, we have a tonal system starting with the week after Pascha, which is tone 1, and it goes through tone 8, and that's different verses for each tone of the week, and it's in the book called the Actoikos. So, although I appear to be stumbling all over this, there's something you have to understand. Orthodox services are very rich. And they're rich because of this liturgical heritage, which is put together in what we call the Typicon. The Typicon determines what services are done, what verses are pulled from which books, on which days, for which saints, and for which feasts. There's great wisdom in the Typicon. Whenever possible, we should fulfill the Typicon exactly. We should not deviate from it. There's a great deal of formation that comes not only for the listener to the services, but also for us in keeping the rule of faith by adhering to the Typicon. In the Russian Orthodox Church, they use what's called the Jerusalem Typicon. It goes back to the 11th century in its current form, where it was simply recording the ancient practices up until that point. The Greek Church uses the Constantinopolitan Typicon, which I think was revised in the 17th century. That's why not all the practices of the Greek Church and the Russian Church are absolutely lockstep identical right now. They've been somewhat modified in the 17th century, still a couple hundred years old. But the Jerusalem Typicon is the most ancient one that the Orthodox use, and it's in a wide use. So you won't have any difficulty finding the reference matter for it and having easy access to it. Now, I want to let you know one other thing. Even though the services can look very complex, they're not super complex. Matins is very complicated, but the rest aren't too bad. And I say that as somebody who had to learn them, okay? They're basically in Vespers 4 variable areas. You're going to worry about 2 of them right now, okay? Only 2, because we're talking about having you do great Vespers, which is what you do on Saturday evenings normally, or on the eve of a feast. Daily Vespers is a little different. I'll teach you the difference after you learn the hard stuff about Vespers. Then it'll be easy to remember. But we're going to teach you how to put together a great Vespers service and to be able to have it ready so that it can be read by you. So I want to remind you of one other thing. We're going to watch a video. It's about 20 minutes long. You can ask questions while we're going. You can ask questions at the end. We will have some questions and answers at the end. But basically, I want you to realize this. This is all step by step. I've done this a long time. I've trained a lot of readers, and I've trained them to be competent readers. If you'll stick with me for this course for 10 weeks, that's it, just 10 weeks, you'll be an expert at the things that you have to do, and you'll be competent in a lot of the things that you aren't really, frankly, going to be doing anytime really soon. We'll take that to another step if we have to, but for the most part, it's about knowing how to put the service together and then knowing how to read it comfortably with clarity so that the listeners don't have to listen to you. They can incline their hearts while they hear what you have to say. All right? So with no further ado, bear with me just a moment. Let's pull up the video.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. My name is Hiram Monk Herman, and I'm a monk at St. Tikhon's Monastery here in South Canaan, Pennsylvania. I'm also a lecturer at St. Tikhon Seminary. This video is the first in a series of 12 videos introducing Orthodox liturgics. That is, the nuts and bolts of how the texts of our divine services are arranged and put together each day. In this first video, I'm going to introduce the liturgical books that we use in the Church's daily services, and I'm also going to discuss various editions of those same books available in English translations. The names of liturgical books aren't always easy to remember or keep straight. They're all Greek words, but we are going to learn what each word means and how that relates to each book's content. The books used in the Church's daily services are the following. First, the Hieraticon, and then the Horologion. Then we have the Menaion, the Lenten Triodion, the Pentagostarion, and the Octoikos, or Paraklitiki, and finally the Typikon. The first two books, the Hieraticon and the Horologion, are grouped together because they're used throughout the Church's year, every day, and they contain the liturgical texts that remain the same each day, that for the most part do not vary throughout the year. So first, the Hieraticon. This is the book containing the text used by the priest and the deacon as they serve. The name Hieraticon derives from the Greek word ierevs. Ierevs is Greek for priest. The word hierarchy comes from this same root word. All the deacons' litanies and all the priests' prayers and exclamations and dismissals are contained in the Hieraticon. Another name for the Hieraticon is the Liturgicon. And in Slavonic, this book is referred to as the Služebnik. In English, it's just sometimes known as the priest's service book. Second, the Horologion. This book also contains the unvarying parts of a service, but it's used not by the clergy, but by the readers and the choir. The word comes from the Greek word for hour, referring to the liturgical hours it contains. In the Horologion are found the Psalms and any other texts on changing hymns or prayers used at the kleros, or reader's stand. In Slavonic, this book is known as the Chasoslov, and in English, we can simply call it the Book of Hours. Now, the next four books, the Menaion, the Pentagostarion, the Octoikos, and the Triodion, these books contain the vast body of variable hymnography found in our services. That is, these books contain all the hymns, the Stichira, Apostica, Troparia, Kondakia, the canons. We'll discuss all those terms later on in the course. But these books contain all the hymns that change each day, depending on the commemoration appointed for each day of the year.
Now, that's a lot of information. Don't freak out. Just pay attention.
Now, before we discuss these books in detail, I'd like us to pause and take a good close look at the church calendar. There are actually two layers to the liturgical calendar. And these two layers interact with each other in different ways each year.
As you can see, it looks very complicated, but learning it piece by piece will make it much easier. He's just doing a basic overview. The next video, which is part of your homework, covers a great deal of the church year, so please don't get stuck on it and don't worry about it right now. He's simply trying to say that the Orlogion and the Herodicon are used every day, and the other books are used on certain days and certain seasons during the church year.
Fall on each year. Again, there's no answer. The date of Pascha is different every year, but unlike Christmas, Pascha is always on the same day of the week every year, Sunday. And Christmas, unlike Pascha, is always on the same date, December 25th. So you can see how there are two layers to the calendar. One layer is what I call fixed. The dates stay the same each year. The other is the movable. The dates change each year. We usually refer to this movable layer as the Paschal calendar, or the Paschalion, because all the commemorations in this layer of the calendar depend on the date of Pascha. On almost any given day of the church year, some elements of the church services for that day are governed by the fixed date calendar, and other elements are governed by the Paschal calendar. In the fixed date calendar, each date of the year has its own commemoration. Most of them are devoted to the memory of a particular saint or group of saints, but some of them are feasts of the Lord or the Mother of God. We already mentioned December 25th, Christmas, the Nativity of Christ. There's also January 6th, the Theophany, or Baptism of Christ, or March 25th, the Annunciation, etc. The hymnography for all the fixed date commemorations is contained in the Menaion. The word Menaion derives from the Greek word minas, that is, month. So there is one volume of the Menaion for each month, 12 volumes total. Volume 1 begins on September 1st, which is the ecclesiastical new year, and volume 12 ends on August 31st. Each calendar date of the year has its own service in the Menaion, so there are at least 366 complete services, because there's one for February 29th in leap years. Complete services, in other words, complete sets of hymns for a specific commemoration in the Menaion. In fact, however, there are quite more than 366, because many dates will have an alternative service for a more recent or perhaps a local saint. In addition to the commemorations from the Menaion, based on the fixed calendar date, there are all other commemorations or themes based on the Paschal calendar. That is, based on how many days or weeks a particular day falls before or after Pascha. For example, the Feast of Palm Sunday, Thomas Sunday, Ascension, Pentecost, and All Saints, they do not have a fixed date from year to year, but they occur a certain number of days before or after Pascha. And they will vary each year according to the date of Pascha. In fact, all the days of Lent and all the days between Pascha and Pentecost have their own set of hymns. And even after Pentecost and after All Saints, the Sunday after Pentecost, throughout the rest of the year, there are still hymns sung according to the day of the week and according to how many weeks you happen to be after Pascha. The commemorations and hymns that are determined by the varying date of Pascha are contained in 3 different books: the Triodion, the Pentecostarion, and the Octoikos. First, the Triodion. This is the book for Lent, or the Great Fast, although in fact we first begin to use the Triodion 4 Sundays before Lent begins. The word Triodion is a Greek word that simply means 3 odes, triodion, 3 odes. And it refers to a feature of Lenten matins, where the canons composed for Lent don't have the usual 8 odes, but only 3. Now, you don't need to know what all that means. We'll talk about it in another lesson. But the word triodion comes from this detail of the Lenten order of services. And the triodion takes us all the way from the season before Lent up through Holy Week until we arrive at Pascha. And there we start to use the Pentecostarion. The triodion contains a complete set of hymns for each day of the week, starting 1 week before Lent begins, in Cheese Fair Week. And it also has hymns for the 3 Sundays prior to that week. Next, the Pentecostarion. This is a book that we use starting on the day of Pascha. And we use it all the way through the Feasts of Ascension and Pentecost and the Sunday of All Saints. This is, in total, a period 8 weeks long. The Pentecostarion contains complete sets of hymns for each day during this period. And by the way, we can use the word service to refer to a complete set of hymns covering Vespers, Matins, and the liturgy for any given day. So, for example, I could refer to the service for January 8th from the Manaean, or the service for the 3rd Wednesday after Pascha from the Pentecostarion. This is a different use of the word service and how it's used when we talk about, for example, the service of Vespers or the service of Matins. Anyway, the name Pentecostarion comes from the word Pentecost, which refers not just to the 50th day after Pentecost, the Feast of Pentecost, the Feast of the Descent of the Holy Spirit, but the word Pentecost in its older use referred to the entire period of 50 days between Pascha and Pentecost. So the book used during Pentecost, or we could say during Paschaltide, is the Pentecostarion. In Slavonic, it has a rather different name. It's called the Triod Sietnaya, or the Flowery Triodion. The Actolikos is our 3rd book in this category. The Actolikos is otherwise known as the Book of the 8 Tones. Acto, 8, ichos, tones, modes. Because this collection of hymns is arranged in 8 sections, each of which is a week long, corresponding to the 8 tones of the Orthodox hymnography. We begin to use the Actolikos the day after we stop using the Pentecostarion. The last day we use the Pentecostarion is the Sunday of All Saints, a week after Pentecost. And so the next day, Monday, which also happens to be the first day of the Apostles' Fast, we begin to use the Actolikos. We start in the Actolikos not with tone 1, as you might expect, but with tone 8, because that's where the Pentecostarion left off. So in that first week after All Saints Sunday, we go through all the Actolikos hymns in tone 8. And then on Saturday evening, at the end of that week, we put away the tone 8 Actolikos volume, and we take out tone 1. Every week, we switch to a new tone at Saturday evening Vespers. And we continue in this 8-week cycle for the rest of the year, up until the following Lent. When we're discussing the Actolikos and hymns that are in different tones, it's important to understand that the different tones refer not only to different music or melodies or chants, but they refer to different texts as well. For example, the Stichira sung at Vespers on a Tuesday evening in the week of tone 1 differ not only in music, but in their actual words from the Stichira sung at Tuesday evening Vespers in tone 2 or tone 3. So the Actolikos contains 56 full services, that is, 56 full sets of hymnography for Vespers, Matins, and liturgy. 56, in other words, 7 days worth of services for 8 weeks. 7 times 8. The Slavonic name is the same, except that we take off the os, the os at the end. So oktoich instead of oktoichos. And there's also another Greek word that's sometimes used for the oktoikos, the paraklitiki. In our next lecture, we're going to discuss how the Menaian calendar cycle of fixed feasts interacts with the Paschal cycle of movable feasts throughout the church year. Most of the time, there are elements of both layers of the calendar present on any given day of the year. But sometimes we'll see that the Menaian will take over and completely displace the material from the Oktoikos. And at other times, the Paschal cycle, specifically the Triodian and the Pentecostarian, will take over and bump out the material from the Menaian. The Typicon, which is the last book that I mentioned in our list of books, the Typicon is the book that governs the interaction of these two layers of the calendar. It tells you what to do when Annunciation, which is on the fixed date calendar, falls on the Sunday of the Cross in Lent, or the Thursday of the Great Canon, or even on Pascha or Bright Tuesday, all of which are on the movable calendar. The Typicon tells you what to do when Ascension, which is on the movable calendar, falls on May 21st, the feast of Saints Constantine and Helen, or when Christmas Eve falls on a Sunday. More on all of this next time. But now, let's discuss some actual editions of these books that exist in English.
He's going to talk about books you can actually get now. Just pay quick attention. This is sort of the ending part of the video.
First, the Hieraticon, or its other name, the Liturgicon. The most complete English Hieraticon is the Antiochian Liturgicon, edited by Bishop Basil of Wichita. Other editions include the Liturgy and All-Night Vigil clergy books published by Holy Trinity Monastery in Jordanville, and the new Hieraticon published by St. Tikhon's Monastery Press, which I am the co-editor of with Dr. Vitaly Permyakov. This last offers the most detailed presentation of the Russian practice, but it does not include the divine liturgies. However, there will soon be a companion volume, also published by St. Tikhon's, that will include the 3 divine liturgies.
Which is now out. It's been published.
Next, the Horologion. There are 3 complete editions of the Horologion in English. First, the Horologion published by Holy Transfiguration Monastery, which follows Greek practice. Then we have the Horologion published by Holy Trinity Monastery in Jordanville. And finally, the Horologion published by St. Tikhon's. These last 2 both follow Russian practice. The St. Tikhon's Horologion is out of print, but if you can get a copy, it is rather useful to have because it's extremely informative and the services are laid out in a manner that is easy to follow and learn. All right, now we turn to the Menaian. There are 2 complete translations of the Menaian in English. Both of them come in 12 volumes. First, the Menaian published by Holy Transfiguration Monastery, which, like their Pentecostarian, is intended for use with the Byzantine melodies. Next, there's a Menaian published by St. John of Kronstadt Press and translated by the late monk Joseph Lambertson. And this is a translation from the Slavonic Menaian, and it includes services to many Russian saints. In addition, the 9 great feasts contained in the Menaian, and remember that there are 12 great feasts, but there are only 9 in the Menaian because the other 3 great feasts are part of the Paschal cycle, and so they are found in the Triodian and the Pentecostarian. But these 9 great feasts in the Menaian are collected together in a volume called the Festal Menaian, translated, like the Triodian, by Metropolitan Kallistos and Mother Mary, and that's available from St. Tikhon's Press. This Festal Menaian is a very worthwhile volume to have, even if you already have a complete Menaian. because it contains much valuable introductory material and many good appendices. And in my opinion, it also is a very beautiful translation. Now, we look at the Lenten Triodion. The go-to translation for the Triodion is that of Metropolitan Callistus and Mother Mary, just like the Festal Nanaean. It was published originally by Faber and Faber in England, but now it's kept in print by St. Tikhon's. It is in 2 volumes. The main volume contains all the Sundays and feasts and other major commemorations, as well as the entirety of the first week of Lent and Holy Week. The volume that's called Supplement contains all the weekdays of the other weeks. A full liturgical library should definitely have both volumes. There are 2 complete English translations of the Pentecostarium. First, that of Holy Transfiguration Monastery, which is translated from the Greek, and in such a way that the hymns can be sung to the Byzantine metered melodies, just like their Maneum. The other is printed by St. John of Kronstadt Press, and it follows Russian practice. There are some other abridged Pentecostaria containing the text for Sundays and feasts, but not including every weekday, most notably Mother Mary's translation from the Monastery of the Veil in Bussy-en-Othe in France. However, this volume is not easy to get a copy of. There are 2 complete English translations of the Catholicos. That of St. John of Kronstadt Press, translated once again by the late monk Joseph Lambertson, and it is in 4 volumes, 2 tomes per volume. And the other is translated by Mother Mary, again from the Monastery of the Veil in France. And it's available from 8th Day Books in Wichita, Kansas. This second edition from Mother Mary, this is in 9 volumes. 1 volume for all the Sunday services in all 8 tomes, and then 8 volumes for each of the weekday services in each tome. The Typicon. There's actually no English translation of the Typicon. However, there are some books that distill much of the content of the Typicon into a format that I'd say is more easily understood by the non-expert. Because even if the Typicon were to be translated, these secondary books would still be necessary for most people, as the Typicon itself is a rather difficult book to understand. For Antiochian and Greek practice, I recommend the Typicon notes prepared by Bishop Basil of Wichita and available online at this link. For Russian practice, the best reference is a book called The Order of Divine Services by Peter Fikula and Father Matthew Williams. It's available in 2 volumes from St. John of Kronstadt Press. Also worth consulting is the Typicon Decoded, a book by Archbishop Job Getcha, published by St. Vladimir Seminary Press. It contains not only information about the rubrics of the services, but also a good summary of the history of our liturgical services. Finally, I'd like to note that many local Orthodox jurisdictions, especially here in America, have their own, often provisional texts that draw from the full books of the Manean, the Catholicos, etc. Sometimes these are made available online. Sometimes they are spiral-bound or coil-bound volumes. These are practical books intended for use in parishes that don't have services every day, and thus that might not have need of complete texts. However, for a choir director or anyone involved in leading the services, it really is best to be as familiar as possible with the complete edition of each liturgical book, so that you understand what sources are being drawn from in the preparation of these more provisional publications. So that's our basic introduction to most of the Orthodox liturgical books. In the next video, we're going to take a deeper look at the church year and the 2 layers of the calendar. And we'll see how all these books work together throughout the year.
All right, so as a reminder, I want to remind you, we're going to take you through these things step by step. We're going to make sure that the familiarity that you have with the services extends itself a little bit more and a little bit more. By the end of this course, Vespers will be very easy for you, very easy for you. You'll be able to distinguish between great Vespers, daily Vespers, small Vespers, and Vespers at a vigil without any difficulty. Practically speaking, there's a couple of things I want you to be able to do. First of all, if you go to arizonaorthodox.com/readers, there's a page there for this course. Right now, only the week 1 material is up. There's a link there for how to build a liturgical library. I think most of the links in that article are good. It's by Father John Whiteford. You do not have to begin building a liturgical library right away, but if it's something that you plan to do in the future, this is a good article that you're going to want to bookmark so that you can go back to it. Secondly, there's a link to the video which we have just watched, so you can re-watch it again. And there is your homework video, which is number 2, lesson 2, which is on the church year. Now, it's only about 15 minutes long. It's not very long, but I do want you to have it, watch it this week. And then when we come together next Monday, we're going to start going over the specific and really the most difficult part of Vespers, which is the Lord I Call verses. That's actually video number 3 by Monk Herman. He does a very good job outlining and preparing and presenting the material. And then we're going to talk about exactly how we do that. The purpose for this is real simple. I can point out to you the variable parts and tell you go and put these things in here. But when you get a broader look at the whole thing, when you get a broader look at the church year and you know all the at least you know what the names of the books are and what they have to offer for the services, you're going to have a great deal more comfort when you take the Vespers book yourself, you take the Actoikos and possibly the Menaion, and you take the variable parts, you put them together. You actually don't even have to put them together. You just open the book during the Vesper service and you chant the variable part. And it'll be done antiphonally with somebody who's doing the standard parts. I know your eyes are probably glazing over at this point. I don't want that to happen. I don't want you to worry about everything you just saw. I want you to remember the Actoikos, the Book of 8 Tones. I want you to remember the Orologion. He says Horologion, but he's the first person I've ever heard pronounce it that way. I was taught Orologion, the Book of the Hours, which has the actual text of Vespers in it, has the actual text of the hours in it. And as I said, I have the St. Tikhon's version. I like it very much. It's based on the Revised Standard Version of the Bible, because a lot of our services, of course, are from Scripture. They're direct quotes from Scripture. It helps if you know what they are. And I like it a lot. It is very hard to find. I really wish they would reprint it, and they will someday. But it's just the text of the actual service itself that is used at the varying hours of the day. That's all done in one volume. That's called the Orologion. The Menaion is the month book. The Festal Menaion is the month book for the 12 great feasts. And then there's the Lenten Triodion. I did not mention the Pentecostarian. There's several other books I didn't mention. There is what we call the abridged Typicon. I don't know if you can see that. It's a tiny little book. You really don't need this unless you're moving on to higher ordinations. But frankly, it's useful. It has a lot of useful liturgical information, and it tells you exactly how to do what you're supposed to do when you're celebrating a service as a deacon or a priest or a bishop. Bishops have all this stuff memorized, but the deacons and priests, not so much. But also, it's got a list of all the different prokimenon and alleluia verses and the different psalms that you're going to read at certain times of the year, the Kathisma readings, how they're broken down, basically by a chart. So it does have value. You can buy it on Amazon. This is not the number one book you should go out and buy, okay? This can be put aside for a while. Right now, all I want you to do is to write in your notes the names of the different books that we talked about and what's in them. You can use your own words, but you're creating your own study book, basically, okay? Now, of course, we're not talking about the actual chanting and reading of things during the service. There's going to be time where we're actually going to do that. And you have to do it a lot, because that's how the muscles in your body and your vocal cords find the right way to do it, the simple way for you to do it. You know, if you want to do a squat thrust and you want to do it the most efficient way, do 500 of them. By the time you get to 100, your body has figured out the most efficient way to do it. And it's exactly the same with reading in church. When you have done a lot of reading, when you've done a lot of chanting, your voice is going to find the right register, the right amount of tension, the right amount of air support, and a lot of comfort with how to present and project your voice in doing the reading. And we're going to do that. But first, we're going to work on these books, the different church year seasons, which is in that second video. And then we're actually going to go right into the Lord I Call verses in Vespers. Vespers is only going to take a couple of weeks, and you're going to have it down pat. It's not complex. As I said, there are 4 variable parts to Vespers. 4. And just so you know what they are, they're the Kathisma readings, the Psalm readings, the Lord I Call verses, Prokimenon of the day, but that really doesn't vary that much, the Apostiga verses, and then the Troparia, which are sung at the very end. Basically, you don't have to worry about, number 1, the Kathisma readings, the Psalm readings, because at Great Vespers, it's always Blessed is the Man. It's always Psalm 1, 2, and 3. And you don't have to worry about the Troparia, because it's basically going to be the Tropar of the tone of the week, for the resurrection, in other words. It's variable, but it's not wildly variable. And in common practice, many churches simply sing Rejoice, O Virgin Theotokos. It's the Lord I Call verses and the Apostiga verses that have places to insert the variable verses from the Manean, the Actoikos, the Pentecostarian, or the Triodian. All of those books based on a different part of the year. So, having said all of that, I hope you're a little bit more familiar with the books we're going to use. If you have any questions, now's the time to ask. Hopefully I know the answer. As I said, I was a reader in an active church for 6 years. When I got to a seminary, the first thing they had me do was a lot of reading. They made me the choir director. Yay, didn't have enough to do. So I had to really be on top of a lot of the services. So I can assure you, I'm not going to overwhelm you. We're going to take everything. We're going to start nice and slow. We're going to ease into it, and we're going to pick up some speed as we go along. I simply ask, if this is something you want to do, I ask you to trust me and trust the system that I'm going to present to you. If you lean into it and you really do what we're going to be doing here for the next 10 weeks, you'll be astonished at how quickly and how competently you will be able to present yourself as a reader. Now, we'll go over psalm chanting and reading in a separate lesson. Don't worry about that. But right now, I just want to know if you have any questions about tonight's lesson. I know it's late, and I do apologize. Most of the videos are shorter than the one that we saw today. And your homework for this week is to review the first video if you need to. It's at arizonaorthodox.com/readers. And to watch the second video, which is the one on the liturgical year, the church year itself, because that sets up a lot of the pattern of which books we use and for what. All right. Any questions in the group chat? Going once, going twice. All right. You guys all have my information. If there's no additional information, I'll be providing additional links for you. Check the readers page on arizonaorthodox.com. And like I said, just do the basic homework of watching that video. Do a little review before we get together again next week. And keep the same link and the same password. It's not going to change over the next 10 weeks. It's the same link. It's the same password. And I'll see you at the same time next week. God bless.